All right, from here, this is probably going to be the hardest part of the whole install, is we got to separate this upper ball joint pin from the top of this knuckle here. There we go. What's up guys, my name is Andy. In this video, I'm gonna be upgrading my upper control arms to the Maier Inc. Mod upper control arm. Now they make 3 different packages. There's the Mod, Mod 1, and Mod 2, depending on what kind of application you have. If you're doing a race application or something, like my case, I'm doing a little bit more, street, strip kind of a thing. This is perfect for what I'm doing because this improves over the stock control arm geometry in several areas, and we'll go over that in a minute. So this is something that I wanted to put in my car for quite a while, and I seek out specific parts for my car, certain things from certain manufacturers because of what they've done with the design. Maybe they're a great company to work with and make quality parts. And in this case, in my opinion, I think Maier has the best upper control arm for my application. So what are you getting in this? There's several things that they have upgraded and improved upon over the stock piece. So let's go over that real quick. Starting with the back here, what they've done is they've got their own in-house design Delrin self-lubricating bushings. So you don't have that steel on steel pivoting that happens when you've got this in the car. Also, they've got it serviceable. You just take out these hex screws on the end here, and you can take this out and service that if you ever need to. The stock ones, you almost have to just buy a new part. So I like that they do that. And then also on here, they've got an arrow pointing towards the front because there are a right and left version of these, and we'll go over that in a minute. So moving out, we get to the spring perches. And with these spring perch mounts move further out, you're gonna get better response over bumps. You're gonna get improvement with your steering without requiring a stiffer shock and spring setup. Moving even farther out, you've got the ball joint. Now this is one of the best parts for several reasons. One, this Moog ball joint is serviceable. You can disassemble this and pull this out and replace the whole thing without having to drill anything or cut anything up. You just take it, you can just unscrew it, put a new one in. But also the position of the ball joint is in a position to where it's further back from the center of the control arm. And the best way to describe that because there's a right and left part, this ball joint has moved further to the rear, and it improves the caster for your steering setup. And in addition to that, it's also put in at an angle. So if you've got your control arm sitting like this in the car, and you can see how this is kind of at an angle when it's flat. Well, Maier, they really like that Shelby drop or the Arning drop mod on these cars. So when you move the upper control arm down, the upper control arm mount position down, it's going to put the ball joint at an angle. And by them putting the ball joint, they're pivoting it in the control arm, it puts it in a vertical spot so that you get more range of motion when the suspension's moving. And this improvement will help with keeping the tires straight, when they're tracked better. When you're going down the highway, the tires won't be hunting on the road. It'll help with turn-in when you're going around the twisties. All of these changes to the upper control arm are going to improve the steering feel of the car, how the car handles. It gets more predictable, and you can anticipate how the car is going to handle when you're driving it. Let's head over the bench real quick and look at all the parts you get in the kit. So here's the 2 upper control arms, and I've got it positioned, if the front of the car was that way, this would be the passenger side and the driver's side. And what I wanted to point out here, again, like I was saying earlier, if this was the center line, you see how it kind of just misses the center of that, and this is because this ball joint is pushed aft. It's pushed towards the rear a little bit to improve that caster, and same thing with the driver's side. So, and then there's an arrow on here that allows you to know which way is, towards the front of the car, so you get them on the right side, the correct side. So there's that. This is the hardware that you get with the grade 8 hardware, the bolts for the upper control arm mount, and then the bolts for the spring perch. And then they also include the Shelby drop or Arning drop template for you guys. If you don't already have that done, this is fantastic. So this is for the 64 to 66. If you were to order this for the 67 to 70, you'd get a little bit different template for it because of the position of the holes are a little bit different. But in my case, I already have this done, but if I didn't, this is what I would use to do that Shelby drop and get to best utilize these upper control arms and how they're designed. And then you get a couple of boots to go over the ball joints. And then the last part is just the hardware. You got a castle nut and a washer, cotter pin, and then the Zerk fitting that's going to go here on the top of each one of these ball joints. So that's what's included in the kit. From here, it's time to get them installed. So the first thing you're going to want to do is get your car safely up on some jack stands, and then go ahead and pull the wheel off. You can do both sides, it doesn't matter. And then we need to go through and we need to tackle this suspension setup before we can get this upper control arm out. Now, you'll notice in my setup, I've got a coil over here, and I don't even have that same, you know, saddle perch or, you know, the spring perch that sits on here because it's built into my coilover. I've got a video that I had done where I replaced the springs on my car earlier and the shocks and stuff like that. And so it talks about how to compress the spring, get it out of there, get it detached. So that's the one you're going to want to follow if you're in that scenario. For me, this is obviously mine's a little bit different than yours. So you're going to have to just bear with me for a minute while I get this taken off. But if you want to go back and watch that video about how to get this out of there and using a spring compressor, that will help you out because we got to get this detached first before we can get everything else done. But once you get that done, then you can pick up where we're going to pick up on this. I'm going to go ahead and get this unbolted real quick, and then we'll start working on this upper control arm. All right, now that that's loose, again, if you guys have the stock spring stuff, it'll just be out of the way. You'll just have to unbolt your saddle, your spring purchase off of the upper control arm and just get it out of the way. But my setup, obviously, I can just leave this here. So, okay, now the next thing you're gonna wanna do is loosen up the bolt here and get this out of the way on your front sway bar and allow these control arm units to pivot and move, and then we can go ahead and go after the nut here on the bottom. Now we can go ahead and go after this castle nut here on the bottom of the upper control arm stud. You wanna go ahead and just turn the wheel out of the way so you can get to it easier. Then we're gonna straighten up this cotter pin, pull out the back, and we're gonna use a 3/4 inch, 7/8 inch socket to get this nut off and get this guy backed off of here so we can get it separated, ready to go. All right, now we got to break this guy loose, and I'm just going to use a big cheater bar and just get in here and just, there, that was easier than I thought. All right, just loosen this up a couple times. There we go, much better. All right, from here, this is probably going to be the hardest part of the whole install, is we got to separate this upper ball joint pin from the top of this knuckle here. And you could beat on it with a hammer, you know, take it and just hit the side of that, and sometimes that will be enough to free it loose, get it out of there. But you may have to use a pickle fork to get in there and drive a wedge in between the top of this and that upper control arm. You're gonna likely damage something in here, but that's okay because we're not gonna reuse this piece, but we're not gonna damage this part, which is important. There we go. All right, got her free. Yeah, see, it started to tear up a little bit on the side of the post here. That's okay, because we're not gonna use this anymore, so we're good. All right, so it's all downhill from here, guys. Now that we got that separated, it's just a couple of things to get it out and get the new one in. When you are taking the rest of this out, there's gonna be some shims up and behind here. And on the 64 to 66, there is shims for the alignment part of this car. And so when you take this off, be careful of those. You don't want to lose them, and try to keep track of which ones are where, and just put them back in the new spot till you guys get your new alignment. But if we go up top here, if you can see those two nuts there on the bolts, we're gonna have to be taking those off to get the rest of this upper control arm out. And because of the distance between those and the headers, it's gonna be a little bit of a work to get it out. You might take your headers out, but I think I'll be able to be okay on this one. But just a heads up on that, this is gonna take you a few minutes to get that out. All right, that's the last one. It just takes a little bit of patience, but you can get them off. All right, we're just gonna slowly just back this out. Careful not to snag it on anything again. And these are those shims I was talking about. See, there's actually a bunch on the front here because whatever was needed for the alignment last time this was done, that's what was put there. So I'm gonna make sure I keep these separate. I know these go on the front stud and those go on the back stud. Now I've already got the Shelby drop done. That's what these new holes are here, but these are the stock mounting holes, and these are the new ones you need to use. Use that template that's included with the kit, and you can drill these new holes, and you can just use the new hardware that comes with it to bolt that template to these holes, and there's a pilot hole in the template for you to drill the new ones. So once that's done, we're gonna put the new one in the lower holes, And then when we put the bolts in here, remember there's the arrow that's on here that points towards the front of the car. Be careful, this little piece right here, this little piece can come out. You don't want to lose that. It does need to be a certain direction. Put it toward, put it closer to the arrow. You don't want to flip it around. You want to leave it right there. And we're going to put the included hardware in here. We'll just put this on the slot for now. And this is where we're going to put those shims back on there. And then we're going to put it in the new lower holes. When you put these shims in there, careful, they might spin around on you. So if you have somebody to help you, it might make it a little bit easier. All right, and that'll hold there in place for now. We need to go put the washer and the nut on the back side. And just like taking those nuts off, just a little bit of patience to get these threaded on there. Once you get them snugged down, then we can go and put the tools on them. So this is another part where if you had an extra set of hands, it'd be helpful, but if not, I'm just gonna use a couple long extensions on my 3/4 inch socket to get to here, and I'll put an impact driver on here, and I'll just put this closed-end wrench on the other side. Actually, I think you have to use the open side to hold that nut in place, and then I can just cinch it down that way. But if you had somebody else to help you, then you can have one person on each side, be easier. From here, now what we want to do is we want to go ahead and finish putting this back together. Don't forget to put this boot on. In fact, don't forget to put that Zerk on too before you assemble this. Put the boot on here, and then you can't really put this in place. So if you have a jack to jack up the lower control arm, it'll help align this and keep this in place while you put all the hardware on here. So in my application, because I've got this lower mount for my coilovers that attach to the upper control arm instead of that saddle piece, I'm going to go ahead and put the bolts in here and get that put together as I continue to drive this up inside the ball joint. Okay, now we can finish driving up the lower control arm so that that seats in there. All right, now that that's all the way up, we can put the included washer and the castle nut on here. And then we need to torque this thing down so we can get this lined up with the slots so we can put the cotter pin in there. And you're just gonna have to just adjust this a little bit till you can get the slots to line up. Cool. All right, all we have to do is just put the sway bar linkage back in. It'll probably be easier to let the control arm down just a little bit. All right, guys, this is fully assembled on my side. Don't forget you might want to add some more grease to the Zerk while you're here. Because of my setup, remember I went ahead and bolted that up. But from here, you would need to attach your spring perch and then put your spring and shock back in like you did, like you took it out. I don't have to do that here, but again, I've got that video that shows you how to do all that stuff, so you'll be covered there. So from here, everything's tightened up, everything's in place. Let's go ahead and get the other side done. All right, guys, now I got the driver's side done. Again, it's the same thing as the passenger side, all the same steps to take everything apart and put it all back together. Again, you can also see the arrow in there that's pointing towards the front, so we know that we got the correct part on the correct side, so everything's good to go there. We can go ahead and put the tires back on and go ahead and lower the car back down. All right, guys, that's it. Now we are done. Don't forget to retorque your wheels once you get that on there. And then really you got to go get an alignment when you're done with this. Now that we've changed some stuff, we've got, that improved caster, particularly if, you messed up with those shims, you should get that done. Some of you guys can do that yourself. If not, take it to a shop, get it dialed in, you'll be set to go. I'm anxious to go out and drive this. I've got a couple of things that I'm doing on the car right now, so I can't drive it right now. So what I want to do is I'm going to have to do a review or a follow-up video on this and see how everything came out. I just can't get it done right now with what I've got going on. So, but I am anxious to get out there. I'm excited. These parts were super easy to install. I was a little concerned, I was a little nervous the part where we put those bolts in the back of the upper control arm, and they come through the shock tower, and you got to put the nut on there. The stock units, the way those bolts are fit into that system, they don't spin. The bolts don't spin. You can just spin the nut on. Well, these, when you go to tighten that nut down, it spins the bolt, so you have to kind of get both sides. Now I was able to reach around and get both things done at the same time. I thought I was gonna have to get the wife in here to help me to get that done, but I was able to get it done, and you guys can too. And that's actually another thing that you know, with this setup, it was just easy to do. Everything went together like it's supposed to. Everything fit like it's supposed to. Like I mentioned earlier, the hardest part was probably separating that upper control arm from that spindle. That, you know, just getting that pickle fork in there and just driving that apart. You might be able to bang on it with a hammer. I don't know. I don't think there's real reason to beat that thing up. Just get a pickle fork. You can get them at your local hardware store, auto parts store, and do that, and away you go. And then from there, everything is just undoing some bolts and doing some bolts, and it was pretty easy. So. Yeah, again, like I said, I was super excited to get this part. Of everything I've seen out there on the market, this is something that addresses a lot of issues that not everybody addresses. Maybe one manufacturer does one thing and the manufacturer does a thing. Maier Inc., you know, with their mod upper control arm, this is the way to go. I'm pumped, and I can't wait to drive the car. So, all right, guys, if you liked the video, give me a thumbs up, and if you subscribe, I appreciate it because it helps my channel out, and we'll see you in the next one.